checks now and put it into the Treasury bills. And by the way, now that we have all this money in the Treasury, let's untax the wealth, and only people earning less than $50,000 a year will have to pay any tax at all. This is the kind of trick that's been played. The trick is to convince people that paying Social Security is a user fee, not a social program to be paid out of the general budget of progressive taxation and taxing the rich, like it used to be before Alan Greenspan and the Republicans came in the 1980s. So basically, Germany doesn't have any of this. They only pay just as you go to war. You'd pay on a pay-as-you-go basis, like Adam Smith said governments should do. The employees pay enough to pay the pensions to the older generation, and they look at it simply as a generational support, not simply as a budget item like is being discussed in America between the Republicans and the Obama administration these days.
And that's interesting that you say that people are required to pay much more in than is actually being taken out of the system.
It's a save enough in advance beyond what you have to pay so that we can lend the money to the government to cut taxes on the rich. It's pay much more as you go, pay much more than the government needs, so the government has enough money to slash the income tax that wealthy people have to pay. It's not really a Social Security system. It's a system of taxing employees, not the rich. It's a tax shift off the wealthy people onto employees. And that increases the cost of employing people in the United States. That is one of the reasons, in addition to the housing cost, that prices America out of world markets. The system that the banks have put in Alan Greenspan are designed to tax labor and siphon off so much through the debt overhead that American labor cannot compete in any market in the world except in arms markets and special markets and food markets. So what they call the free market efficiency is crippling the efficiency of the United States by adding to housing costs and adding needlessly to the Social Security and Medicare costs. You can follow it all by looking in the Treasury Bulletin or the Federal Reserve Bulletin that shows how the savings of the Social Security Administration go up every year. Well, there's no need for any of the savings ever to have taken place. And if it wouldn't have taken place, then workers would have been able to keep much more of the salaries and wages that they earn, and the government would have had to maintain higher taxes on the rich. But the Republican policy was tax labor, untax wealth. This is the class war with an iron fist.
I'm speaking with financial economist and historian Dr. Michael Hudson. Today's show, Debt Deflation in Europe and America. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. Well, since we've talked about Social Security, what about the new, what is called Super Congress, Committee of 13, Obama being the 13th? What is the composition of this committee, and what about the automatic budget cuts that would go into effect when, in November?
That seems to be the case. The Super Congress is made up basically of people who spend a lifetime wanting to cut Social Security. They say there's a choice. Either you give more money to the very, very rich, or you cut back Social Security in the savings. And the basic rule in high finance is big fish eat little fish, and something has to give. There have been a lot of financial losses. There are millions of American savers who've put their paychecks into Social Security. Let's take their money. Let's wipe them out. Let's just reduce what they get, reduce their savings, and give it to ourselves. This is the position of Mr. Obama, who basically says, my main street is Wall Street. And people should realize that basically his belief is that Social Security should be cut back to give money to the rich. He could say just as much as George Bush said, that's my constituency. And that is. And Mr. Obama will be sort of the deciding vote, but he's already appointed people to the Budget Commission and the Social Security Commission a year ago, or when he first was elected, people who, as we've spoken on your program before, want to cut back Social Security by pretending that there's a crisis and that if the government needs money, the poor should lose, not the rich. That's it in a nutshell, and that's despicable. I mean, I'm amazed that there's not in America more of a political reaction against this. I mean, people have really saved their money. They worked very hard to put this money into Social Security. This is real savings. And for the Republicans to say this is an entitlement, these people are on welfare, they're treating the elderly and the retirees as if they're somehow welfare recipients that are freeloading off the rich, when it's actually the banks that have been given a handout. And if the Bush and Obama administration can give $13 trillion to the banks to make sure that they don't lose on their finances, then why can't they give another $1 trillion to Social Security? The reason is that there's a class war on. That's the only explanation for this. And if you don't realize that there's a class war, and it's not the kind of war that people talked about a century ago. It's fought in the financial arena, and the idea is basically for the big savers to take the savings of the little people, then you're not going to understand what politics is all about these days. Essentially, Mr. Obama wants to be able to take the issue out of Congress. It's very hard for congressmen or senators to actually vote against Social Security and Medicare because most voters are in favor of it. So they want to blame somebody. If you look at who the campaign contributors of the super committee are, they're very heavily the financial sector. They're heads of financial committees, and it's no matter what, even if they're unpopular, they're going to be able to retire with such high-paying jobs in the financial sector. It's what the Japanese call descent from heaven, that they'll get their payoff for basically taking the heat on stiffing the Social Security recipients for their constituency, which is Wall Street.
Food is becoming very expensive in the United States. Do you see this trend continuing? And is the rise in food prices a consequence of the weak dollar?
It's not a consequence of the weak dollar. It won't continue. It'll escalate very rapidly. There are a number of reasons. One thing is the global warming is creating water shortages all over the world, and also the urbanization is doing that. But also there's been a huge diversion, especially in the United States, of cropland to grow gasohol, to make gasoline out of. And that's diverted away from food, essentially, for cars and for energy. The Canadian tar sands are one of the worst things because they use 10 gallons of water for every gallon of coal gas. I was actually the economist working for ERDA, the Energy Research Development Administration, around 1975, and did the study of this. And when the Carter administration came in, they said, look, how are we going to pay for all this high-priced OPEC oil now that the OPEC countries are raising the price? And Carter's solution was to raise the price of wheat. And the idea was that coal gasification and liquefaction would divert so much water away that it would turn the Western American states into a desert. So what we're seeing already in the West are the incipient water wars. Who's going to get the water? Will it be urban areas? Will it be agricultural areas, farmland? What will the price of water be? Will the water be diverted to make gasohol and coal liquids? What is it going to be? The other part is that speculators all over the world are buying land as they're moving out of credit and of finance because they think, well, land is real, everybody's got to eat. So all of a sudden food is becoming as much of a speculative vehicle as gold or copper or stocks.
So you would say that speculation is one of the big reasons why food prices are going up. Land speculation,
yeah.
Speculation in water?
Not speculation in water, but just the fact that water levels are falling, and food is made as much out of water as it's made out of soil. And that's become a real problem, as is the weather. The whole global warming is causing weather changes that are reducing crop yields. Flooding and droughts go together.
And then, of course, putting land and water, gasohol, that was a political decision, right?
Yes. Deliberately, the mainstay of America's balance of payments has actually been food exports. And most of the constant in American foreign policy since 1945 has been to base its policy on American export markets, and it's food exports that have been able to cover the cost of American imports and American spending abroad.
And why is the price of gasoline rising in the United States?
That would be a job for the anti-monopoly regulators to look at if they were still regulating. We don't know because the regulatory agencies under Obama have stopped regulating. Obama has gone not only much further than George Bush, but Obama has gone further than Dick Cheney. He's appointed a Justice Department that refuses to prosecute financial crime. He's appointed Environmental Department that just is very much like the Reagan Environmental Department, give everything to the oil companies, offshore drilling. Obama has just paralyzed the government by putting deregulators everywhere in a way that George Bush, a Republican, never could have been able to do, because the Democrats would have been able to oppose a Republican president from disabling the American regulatory agencies to the extent that Obama has done, because they can't stop one of their own party members from taking this position.
Are there similarities between the economic crisis of September 2008 and the present economic situation?
Yes, we're still in the same situation. We're still in the aftermath of 2008. It's very funny that economists are talking about a double-dip recession. We've never got out of the crash after that. The economy has not recovered. The stock market has gone up because the Federal Reserve has been flooding the stock market and the bond market with liquidity, but the employment market, living standards, sales are not going up. Housing is still down. So we're in much more than a Great Recession. We're going into a lost decade. We're going into a period where wages are going to drift downward into a kind of a slow crash because the government is not renegotiating mortgages downward. It's not canceling the debts. The federal government is not bailing out the cities that are in trouble. And there's a downward financial spiral basically coming from the debt situation. I mean, basically, the question really isn't whether we're in a double-dip recession. It's why has a recovery from the crash, why hasn't it taken place? And how can the government have created $13 trillion of Treasury and Federal Reserve cash and loans and guarantees to Wall Street for the wealthiest 1% of the population? Why hasn't this trickled down and created jobs? Why hasn't the bank bailout created jobs? And how do we jumpstart an economy when 70% is consumer spending, but the consumers aren't spending because they don't have any money, because they're worried that they may be unemployed or that they're one paycheck away from unemployment? So what has Washington not been doing that it should have been doing? Well, for one thing, President Obama, before he was elected, said exactly what he was going to do. He was going to renegotiate the mortgages downward, and the banks have not done it. And Obama said, well, just forget it. The Federal Reserve has flooded the banks with liquidity, saying now they can lend out and the economy can borrow its way out of debt. Why hasn't this worked? Well, the banks send all the money abroad. The fact is that giving money to the banks, giving money to rich people, doesn't create jobs for the people. And Mr. Obama's staff and his economists keep saying, well, the rich people are job creators. But they're not job creators. They're the ones who are closing down the factories. They're the ones who are outsourcing American labor. They're the people who are just working labor more intensively. So there's a whole conflict between reality and what the politicians are saying. And I guess that's what a politician's for, to make people pay attention to what he's saying, not to the real world.
Are the banks then creating a permanent depression?
The debt overhead is creating it, and the banks want to collect as much debt as they can. So it's almost something impersonal. Every economy for hundreds of years has had debts grow more rapidly than the economy can afford to pay. And what happens at a point is there's a crash, and the crash wipes out debts, but it also wipes out savings on the other side of the balance sheet. Well, this time, when the crash has come, the government has said, okay, we